Hey everyone, welcome to the JFree906 podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Freeman, and tonight we have Jimm and Seth joining. Guys, how are you doing tonight?
Doing awesome. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Oh man, I tell you what, we had a great show last night. We have another fantastic show tonight. I can't wait to get started. But before we do, I wanted to just say a little bit here tonight. These two gentlemen, Jonathan Dover and Stanley Milford, have been on quite a few different podcasts and TV shows of late. They were recently featured on Beyond Skinwalker Ranch. I think it was episode number 6, correct? Was that? It was number 6. I think there were 7 total, so it was number 6. Though.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Sounds about right.
And I was very, very impressed. Of course, we have seen Jonathan Dover. We have seen him on the Secret of Skinwalker Ranch before. We're going to talk about a little bit of those things tonight, and also some of the many, many strange cases that they have been on within the Navajo Nation. And so I'm really excited about that. If you are new to the channel, this is what we do. We talk about all sorts of different types of things, whether it be the Curse of Oak Island or Skinwalker Ranch or High Strangeness, paranormal, Bigfoot, cryptids and UFOs, UAPs, all kinds of stuff. Pretty much anything that interests me. And I found a couple of guys that kind of fall right into that as well with Seth and Jimm. So I really appreciate you guys helping out tonight with this.
Oh, I wouldn't miss this for the world. Thank you for
truly honored. Yes, thank you, Jeff. Thank you for the opportunity, and just excited to be here. And hello to everybody in the chat. You guys are awesome.
Yep. And of course, we have Linda down working hard in the chat tonight. I may open it up a little bit to a few questions later on, but I will let you know when as we get to it. I know these two gentlemen are going to have a lot to share with us tonight. If you would, please, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and give us a thumbs up if you like the content of the show that we put out here tonight. We appreciate that very much. It helps out a lot. And also if you would like to help support the show, we have the Patreon channel. It's patreon.com, and you can find me there as JFree906 as well, or you can buy one of the travel tumblers, the travel mugs that we have. The link for all that is down below in the description. And without further ado, let's bring in our two esteemed guests tonight, Mr. Jonathan Dover and Stanley Milford. Gentlemen, how are you doing this evening?
Doing well.
Doing great.
Fantastic. I as I mentioned earlier on, when I first was introduced to you guys, to John first on the Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, then I found out that you are former Navajo Rangers, and you've kind of been given the moniker of the Paranormal Rangers, which I like. I'm really impressed by that. I think that's a really interesting label to have upon you now because of the things that you get into. But I wanted to start off by asking about the Navajo Rangers. Now, I'm learning a little bit about what that means. Is it like a law enforcement officer? Is that for the nation? Is that what that is pretty much? Jonathan, if you want to take that.
The Navajo Ranger is a law enforcement officer that specializes in both renewable and non-renewable resources. What we're talking about is kind of like forestry, fish and wildlife in the park and recreation areas. We're the park police. And we do search and rescue. We do mines and minerals, water resources, archaeological resources, and the list goes on.
Mm-hmm. And you've been this for a while. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, and then in the absence of any police officers, we'll take over and do that work too, if needed, if it's an emergency situation or involves life or death.
Mm-hmm. All right. And you, Stan, you've been quite a few years. You just recently retired. Is that correct?
That's correct. I retired from the Navajo Nation back on May 5th of this year. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm fairly new to it. I'm still under training as far as retirement goes. John has retired 3 times now and is kind of guiding me through everything.
Mhm. So how long were you? How long were you Rangers?
Go ahead, John.
Okay. I was a ranger for actually 27 years. There's a 4-year gap in there where I went off to the city of Winslow, Arizona Police Department and made sergeant over there and then came back.
Okay.
For me, I worked basically about 23 years.
Wow.
Was under the Rangers Department, working up from Ranger recruit to Ranger sergeant, and then I was delegated as the chief ranger in the last 2 years of my career. So.
Wow. Interesting. So, and I would imagine, I know I heard, and I'll let you guys talk about this a little bit, but um, when it came to some of the cases that you guys have been involved in, this is where I guess you would find yourself going on cases that were a little bit out of the ordinary, maybe to most of your like, you can elaborate on that a little bit. That I guess where it got you started into how did you going toward the paranormal side, or the high strangeness side of things. How did that all start?
Stan, you
Well,
want to take this?
sure. One thing you must understand is that, okay, the Navajo Nation is 27,000 square miles. So that's about the equivalent of West Virginia, the state of West Virginia.
Wow.
So it's quite large, covering Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and now Colorado. So the area is quite large. Most of your officers that are out there patrolling, uh, under natural resources and public safety also, are witnessing phenomenon that would fall under that umbrella of paranormal or supernatural. They're out there in the field and they see this and they witness these things. So actually, me and John were encountering things even before we were assigned to the special projects unit and actually assigned to deal with these kind of cases. So um, it was there from the beginning, really, I think. And but formally, there was a case where there was an elderly woman who witnessed, and she claimed that there was one of these things that people call a Bigfoot stepped over into her sheep corral. This was in a high elevation area, and picked up one of her sheep and took off with it. And so she called the dispatch. 2 rangers were assigned. It just happened to be that they were rookie rangers. One of the rangers was what we would call a joker, or he's always clowning around, making jokes, laughing and kidding around. And I think the grandmother overheard them laughing or whatever, carrying on back at the patrol unit or whatever. And she took offense to this and contacted the chief again. And so from there, he called a department-wide meeting and he said, when you guys get these kind of cases, you will investigate them professionally and you will handle it just like you would any other type of investigation. He said, you may not understand it, you may not believe in it, but you're there to help people, so you will do that. And then he turned and looked at me and John and pointed at us and he said, and you two will manage these cases. So that's basically how it began. It wasn't that John and I were raising our hands to volunteer for it or anything. It wasn't that way. We were assigned to do it just like any other case. We were already doing special projects, so we were doing SWAT work. We were doing dignitary protection. We were taking high-profile investigations. All of those kind of things. I did security for the motion picture Lone Ranger with Johnny Depp. those kind of
Oh,
things.
wow.
Did security for the band Metallica when they filmed out there. Those kind of things at times. So yeah,
Wow, that is really interesting. That's
yeah,
wow. To be a
yeah.
part of that, all the with the movies and stuff like that too. That's
Oh yeah,
so
a
you
lot
were
of movie, a lot of
yeah,
movies.
wow. That's
Yeah.
fantastic. So you guys kind of, and I heard John make this comment once before. I heard on one of the other podcasts you were on about how you got, um, if you want to use the term, how you got assigned to this. You were told you were going to do it, but and you called
Yeah,
it. Yeah,
yeah,
go ahead.
we were voluntold that
Voluntold.
we were going to do these cases.
Well, I mean, and that's something too. One of the things that I found very impressive by listening to you guys and kind of covering some of the background, getting my background on you was that you mentioned about helping people, and Stan, you just mentioned it a moment ago.
Right.
And that's something that I know that you guys have taken very, very seriously is that what you're doing is you're helping people out there. And I
Right.
admire you for that, both of you for that certain thing. But like you said, the one guy was kind of like a joker or whatever. He wasn't taking it seriously. You
Yeah.
guys take this very seriously, don't you?
Oh yeah, we do. I think at the time that John and I went through our separate academies, it was instilled in us that you're there to one of two things, and that's either to help people or to protect people.
Mhm.
And so yeah, we do take that very seriously, and really, I think that's a part of why I ended up retiring when I did, because for me, it was hard to see, every time you turned on CNN at night, you were hearing law enforcement officers abusing their authority.
Yeah.
And for me, it was embarrassing. I mean, John and I did our careers, and we were able to do our jobs and survive doing that job. At times when it was very dangerous, but you rely on your training, and so yeah. Anyway,
Yeah, I can only imagine. Tell it if you don't mind. I mean, one of the other things too, John, you had mentioned about your grandfather and about him being trained as a young man to be a medicine man. Um, could you, for me, and help me understand? I mean, we hear the term, and I have to apologize because I'm a little bit ignorant on this, and that's why I'm asking this question. Could you help me understand what exactly a medicine man who's being trained as a medicine man, what that entails?
Okay, a medicine man in the old is a practitioner who heals people.
Mhm.
In Navajo, you have this idea of balance or hojo, and when that balance is disturbed by some dramatic fashion, people will go to a medicine man to get healing. He can heal from various ailments, sicknesses, and things like that, including supernatural attacks. He knows all of that stuff. My grandfather had been trained to be a medicine man from a very young age, maybe about 8 years old or so. And he was being taught all his life. If you look at just one ceremony, the enemy way dance, held over 3 nights, you might have around 250 songs that are sung, their verses, and be sung exactly. They have to be memorized. You can't make a mistake on any one of them.
Wow.
And people pay the medicine man a lot of money for these ceremonies, and they're going to be the first ones to jump up and say, "No, it's wrong. That you didn't do it right." So uh, imagine these guys having to learn many, many different ceremonies. So it's a lifetime of teaching, that
Wow.
that trains a medicine man. Now men are more of eye, nose, and throat specialists. They'll learn just one or two ceremonies to do, and that's what they're known for. So they don't do all of the stuff. My grandfather, in his 20s, became a Christian, and later on he went to school and became a minister. And so he was a minister there in Fort Defiance for many, many years. Talked to me about some of the things that we were encountering and the things that I needed to know about those, how to protect myself and things like that. So he passed on a little bit of his knowledge to me.
Wow, that's a, you talk about a lifetime. And that is something now, is that something that someone would volunteer to get into, or is it more of an assigned, like a voluntold, or is it, how does that work for someone to want to be a medicine man? Is that something you would, like you would want to do? You would apply for that or work towards that, or how does that?
Long time ago, I think a child would be chosen as an apprentice by a medicine man and by the family. And if that individual showed characteristics of what would be needed, to be a medicine man, that's how they were chosen. And at a very, very young age. And they were raised in that culture all the way through adulthood.
Wow. That's fascinating. That's one of the things that I talk about that frequently when we discuss, or when I discuss different things about, on the podcast here, is how much I admire the nations, the tribal nations, and their heritage. When it comes down to, stories of, like Bigfoot or cryptids of some sort or anything like that. I would tend to be more, I would tend to believe more of it coming from, First Nations people, that from the passing down through families, the story, because I'm going to hold more to that than I would be for just anybody to come up and say something to me about, a particular cryptid or a Bigfoot or whatever. When it comes down from the tribal peoples, that holds more weight for me personally, just because of the heritage. And I don't know, am I saying that correctly? How things like that are passed down and are more, what's the word? When you tell a story and you pass it around the room, by the time it gets around the room, its story's changed in most cases, but I don't think that's the case when you talk about like the Navajo Nation, the peoples passing down those. I think the stories are more, they stay true to the true story. Is that true to say it that way, or
in Navajo culture, you have an oral tradition, which means that historical things are passed down from generation to generation. These things are exact. When you hear them, we interviewed an old man about his encounter with and over 4 years and 3 interviews, which were all recorded. His story really didn't change at all. He never added to it. He never embellished it. He never took anything away from it. And that's what we noticed about a lot of the older Navajos that tell us these things.
Mm-hmm. Is that tradition?
Indigenous,
go ahead.
Indigenous tribes, they have an oral history. And like John said, when it's passed down or given to another, it's not changed. It stays consistent.
Yep. You'd mentioned like the songs, the 250 songs, and they have to be exact. That's what I meant by that. And that's why if the story is being told to me, or a story is being told to me, um, by a First Nations person, that's going to hold more weight for me, because of that, the same thing. And that's, I just wanted to, I knew that was the case, and I apologize for having to ask that question, but it just seemed to me that was the case, and I wanted to hear that from you as well, because it really, it means a lot that the story doesn't get changed. It's exact. Exactly, right there. Maura said it right there. I think that's why the Native American traditions are so important. Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
that's the point I was trying to make.
It helps us understand
and if,
all of our stories.
Yeah, if you'll let me be a little bit radical here,
please.
One of the things that we were always called savages, and the actual definition of a savage is somebody who does not have a written language. So for the manifest destiny people that were coming across and displacing Native American tribes, they referred to them as savages in the Constitution, in the very first page. So, we've just come to accept that, that it was somebody else's definition, because we didn't have a written system of writing, so immediately you put somebody down and say, well, they're subhuman, because they don't write. We did have a way of writing in sign language and everything else. My great grandmother spoke 7 different languages.
Wow.
Just native languages, including English. And it was funny because she'd be on a bus in Los Angeles, and somebody would come up and start talking to her in Spanish, and she'd be talking back to them either in Comanche or Kawapachi, and they didn't know how to deal with it, so they just leave her alone. But that's her way of handling that situation.
Right. Wow. Well, now I know that getting back to what you guys do today. Now, like I was saying earlier, you've been kind of given the marker as the Paranormal Rangers, and I find that so intriguing because of the again, going out on some of those cases. Would you mind sharing a few of those cases with us tonight that you have gone out on? I think that's, to me, that I've heard a few of them that you've spoken on some of the other podcasts, and it blows my mind to hear about some of the things that you guys have witnessed, you've seen firsthand, and been involved in, and yet you keep on going. Would you mind sharing a few of those cases with us here tonight?
Stan, you want to start?
Sure. One of the right now things related to what our government's referring to as UAPs or UFOs is really a hot topic. And so there was one incident where John and I were assisting to locate an individual that had drowned in the San Juan River, which is the northern boundary of the Navajo Reservation. And John and I had put the department boat in the water over at Lake Powell and had traversed up the San Juan River. And it got late in the afternoon, and we ran into a debris field, and we didn't want to risk damaging the props, so we just decided that we were going to camp out. And John and I were the type to always be prepared for any situation. So we had all of our camping gear and food and everything. So we pulled the boat ashore and set up camp. And that night, I was laying there on the cot. We were facing the south toward the river. We were on the north side of the river, the north side of the river facing south. And I noticed an object that was coming across the sky from the west to the east, and it was making a really distinct zigzag pattern. And I got John's attention, and we were watching this. It was this object was at least maybe 3 times larger than what you would see with the satellite, and it was amber in color, but it was making these really consistent and distinct zigzag pattern. And as it got about right above us, about 12 noon, we noticed that there was two. John identified them as F-16 fighters with their afterburners on, and they were following this object right in behind it. But all of a sudden, this object, it continued the zigzag pattern, but it accelerated from almost at 12 noon all the way to the edge of the horizon in less than 2 seconds.
Wow.
And to do that, it would have been upwards of like 10,000 miles an hour. And it left the F-16 fighters where they were at the 12 noon position. But to witness this, firsthand with your own eyes, really, that's where you get a sense of objects that are otherworldly, that are beyond our technology and beyond our capabilities. So that was one incident where we did witness an object traversing the sky that was just unbelievable in its performance.
Right. Clearly not a satellite, like you said. First of all, it was bigger than a satellite would normally be. A satellite's going across, and I've seen many, of course. I'm always looking up. You see a pinpoint of light, and it's moving at a steady rate, slowly across the sky. It's not that big. It's pretty small. You said this was quite big, and it was doing the zigzag. Two things that are clearly not a satellite. Yeah.
And F-16s don't chase satellites.
No, they don't chase satellites.
No.
Wow.
John, you can. I don't know if you have.
Well,
yeah. So y'all mentioned the San Juan. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, we're doing an investigation up in Bloomfield area for 30 people that saw Bigfoot, and police department, and asked for help. And the lieutenant at the police department in front of the newspapers there basically laughed. He goes, ah, ha, ha, ha. And he says, I wonder how much these people have had to drink. And the papers quoted him. And so now the 30 people are really upset, and they don't want anything to do with the police department. So they called the Rangers. And we sent a 6-man crew up there, forward looking infrared systems, and put boots on the ground for 3 days and 2 nights. Wow. Just interviewing witnesses and finding out what was happening. And at night we would set up posts and be looking with night vision equipment to see if we could see anything. And at the end of the 3 days, we called it quits. We came out with foot track evidence. We came out with stride distances, the hair samples were, we had a Bigfoot hunter that was with us. That was kind of, there was in a capacity to advise. And he took one of the hair samples and sent it to a lab. And the lab came back, the DNA came back unknown carnivore. Which is amazing all by itself, because you have to realize that there is a worldwide DNA animals all around the world,
right?
And it has basically millions of DNA profiles, and this didn't match anything that they had in the DNA database. All they could determine was it was unknown. So
wow.
We finished that, and I'm on my way home. By the time I get to a place called Indian Wells, it's 2 a.m. And so, I've been hitting it pretty hard, and I'm about maybe 60 miles from home or so. And as I'm driving, I passed a location we know locally as the Sugar Bowl, which is where the road takes a big dip into this valley and comes up and out on the other side. Once I got on the other side on Navajo Route 15, I see this green light off to the side on the north side of me, or my right. And immediately I found a new street light up there outside of their house, and it's kind of greenish looking. So I didn't think anything more of it. I kept going down the road, and pretty soon this light is following behind me. And it's about 100 yards behind me or so. And I watched it, and now I'm watching it very intently. And as I get further down the road, I'm thinking, okay, I'm armed. Should I turn around and confront it and see what this thing is? See that it was hovering above the roadway, and there was a faint light on the roadway, maybe about 6 feet below it, where you could see that it was a round object that was floating, and it was keeping up with my vehicle. So as I get near a place called Delcon, maybe about 2 or 3 miles before I get to Delcon, I decided maybe turning around and confronting the smartest thing to do. So I just took this idea of, well, you leave me alone, I'll leave you alone. And I kept going. It veered off the roadway, and I know all these back roads there, all the dirt roads. There's no entryway or gate that it could have gone through. It just went over the right-of-way fence and angled off going to the south. And about 1.5 miles, 2 miles out, it mesa. And once it got on top of the mesa, it turned red.
Oh, wow.
Now I'm really watching it, because now it's paralleling my course. And the thing that occurred to me was that we're coming to this little town with a whole bunch of lights, and it actually went around the town on the south side.
Really?
So I go through Delcon, but I'm still watching this red light. Now it's alongside, maybe south side, paralleling my course. And I go another 12 miles or so past State Route 87 and Route 15 junction, the road that goes to Second Mesa and Winslow. And as I get on the other side, about maybe 2 or 3 miles down the road, I'm really watching this thing, and now I'm starting to feel just a little bit uneasy. Maybe it's that. And so I'm thinking this is maybe not good. And as I drove, the light just faded out and disappeared.
Wow.
So I just kept going. I'm watching all around me the rest of the way home. It never reappeared. But just strange stuff.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And it was funny because you said at the end, you started to feel a little uneasy about it. I would have felt uneasy about it when I saw it was green light. Back when it was following you, that's when it would have started feeling uneasy to me. And again, but being a ranger like that, I can understand that, when you are in the moment, that's when your training kicks in, I would imagine. And that's when that, I have to focus here on the situation. And it just probably is a natural thing for you, I would imagine. It's amazing what the human, capacity is when you are faced with a situation like that but again, with your training as a ranger, I would imagine that, I was going to say like nerves of steel kind of come into play there, especially with many of the things you've seen and done.
Well, I think over the time, you've worked in law enforcement, and especially doing SWAT work and things of that nature, you develop that sixth sense. You hone that ability to go into a situation and trust your gut instinct and what it's telling you, because a lot of times it can be a life or death situation, and you have to learn to trust that.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that we do is our philosophy. We do not approach things with a negative feeling. We try to go in and stay as neutral as we can. So, if you get a situation where I turn that vehicle around and I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to protect myself, that shows negative intent on my part. And I don't want to give into that. I'm the kind of person, I've seen UFOs close up before, and I'm really curious. If one would have stopped in front of me, I think I would have walked up to knock on the door and ask it for a ride. So it's not something to fear. It's just something that's there.
Right. Wow. Hey, Seth, I think you were having a question there a few minutes ago. Did you want to proceed with that, or?
Yeah, I was just curious, Jonathan, or John, you were saying you were driving home. Was this from, when you saw the orb, was this from the Bigfoot investigation that you were completing?
Yes, it was from the place where we're doing the investigation in Bloomfield to maybe 2.5 hours. And then from Window Rock to where I'm at, I was about an hour and a half.
Did you feel that to be connected? And that kind of leads me into just a broader question of how many of y'all's investigations followed you home, or even maybe bled into other investigations that made you think that these things are all connected?
Well,
in
John
this
and
particular case, go ahead, Stan.
I was just going to say, over the years, John and I have developed theory that all of these things that are referred to as paranormal, supernatural, are interconnected. A lot of indigenous and native peoples have the philosophy that everything in our world is connected in some way. And when it comes to the paranormal, there is a connection, whether that's what we feel is by and through inner dimensions, other planes of existence. And so, yeah, there's definitely something there.
Yeah, at the time of this incident, this was one of the first investigations that we did. And when I was coming back, I didn't have the background or the number behind me to say that these were connected. Out that when we saw increases in Bigfoot reporting, there was corresponding increases in UFO sightings and vice versa. So we started seeing that, and we started, as investigators, you start looking for how these things could be linked. What are some of the deals, and back in as far as 2006, 2009, we started coming up with this theory of multiple dimensions, and that some of these things were coming through from other dimensions. And it made sense if you think of UFOs, and I still prefer the term UFO because
I do too.
So do I.
The government,
Same.
The government has to use a new term so that they don't get embarrassed when they say UFO.
Right.
But we started looking at these things, and we started saying, the Navajos have a emergent story of coming to what they call this world through several other worlds, and in two of those other worlds, they crawled through what amounts to a hole in the sky. And I started looking at that and thinking, wow, what if they're talking about a dimensional portal not coming up through the earth like people thought in the past. And what if these are similar, that we're seeing things from the past, being cast here by other dimensions. Skinwalker Ranch had a Bigfoot that where a hole opened up in the darkness, and they said you could see blue sky behind it, and a figure tumbled out of it and stood up and walked off. That was determined to be a Bigfoot. And then I've talked to natives in northern Washington, Alaska, who have said that they've seen Bigfoot sitting behind some bushes or behind a tree, and as they watched them, they faded out and disappeared. And we also have evidence that happens when we track Bigfoot, and the tracks disappear in trackable ground. And that's physical evidence there that
absolutely
can't be disputed.
Wow.
Yeah,
John, can I ask just a quick question? Is there anything? I've heard some traditions talk about how they believe that some of the Sasquatch may actually be using some kind of natural energy that they draw from trees. Is that anything that you've heard in any of the investigations or any of the traditions that you are familiar with?
I hope he's still there.
I haven't heard.
Okay.
Hang on.
Yeah, your screen went black. Oh, there you are. Okay,
there we go.
Yeah, I had a mess. I hadn't heard of that particular theory, but anything can happen. We live in a much stranger world than we think we do, and modern science uses the scientific method, which discounts automatically anything else. And so they don't work, and they discount it, and yet it's being used today by all the major countries to spy on each other.
Yeah, that's something that I heard you say before, John. You mentioned that before about everything being connected: UFOs, Bigfoot, Skinwalker, all with a common linking them to. And then you talked about string theory and also parallel dimensions. And you were talking my language when you said these things, because we've talked about, in the show Expedition Bigfoot is about to start again here in just a couple of weeks. And we discussed that quite frequently about how is it possible that they can be followed with a thermal camera and then just simply vanish off the thermal camera, just gone. And it was mentioned like walking into a behind a wall and just gone all of a sudden. How is that possible? And the only explanation that I could even think of, that my brain can even come up with, is they stepped into some sort of a doorway. And now you talk about that, just locks that in. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, both Stan and I have also talked with David Pilates, and he does the Missing 411 series. And he just came out. I'm going to plug him here. He just came out with a new movie called Missing 411. And I got interviewed by him, and I'm going to speak at a conference this October for him. And he's starting to think the same thing, that a lot of these missing people are walking in through a dimensional gate. And these gates, we like to think of them as Stargate gates, that are very elaborate stone structures. And I look at it as kind of like more of a that moves together. It's constantly in motion, and these gates pop open randomly here and there, and sometimes people walk through them.
And
Hey, hello, James. There's James Keenan. Yeah, we're going to talk about something that James is very familiar with here too in just a little bit. And but thank you for coming by and saying hi, James. Appreciate that very much. Are you familiar with James Keenan, Stan, and John?
I know of James. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I've heard of him.
Yeah. But yeah, when you and seeing you do that, putting your hands together like that and showing that, and that's something that I've been, and I mentioned this on the show before. So folks that have heard this before, please forgive me. But talking about paranormal investigations, going out and doing a paranormal investigation, and so many times people are so quick to say that it's a ghost, it's a spirit of someone who's passed. I'm not saying that that isn't the case sometimes, but I think that sometimes they're misinterpreting uh, a crossover of two different parallel dimensions that happen to be crossing over at that point at that time. And
Yeah.
that's why they're seeing some kind of a phenomenon happening at that point, at that point in time. Is that kind of, does that go along with your way of thinking on that as well?
For me, I think people have these ideas, these naturally occurring uh, gates like Skinwalker Ranch and
Mhm.
Sedona and other places throughout the world that have these naturally occurring gates. But in reality, I think that a 10-year-old child picking up an Ouija board can actually create a gate
Mm-hmm.
there with that device. And so I think they can happen. People can learn to manipulate these things and can cross back and forth. I think that's the case, um, even with the Navajo witchcraft and shape shifting. I think these individuals that are practicing this, one of the abilities is to be able to cross back and forth between our physical world and other dimensions. And the same with the Bigfoot. John and I have investigated cases where you might be tracking a Bigfoot maybe over miles, and then it'll start at one point and then it'll end at another point. And so it appears that this thing is coming to our physical world, and then it's also leaving.
Hmm.
So or it's being placed here deliberately by another party, and then being retracted back, which you know it could be one of many things.
Right. And unfortunately, we just don't know. We don't have enough
Yeah, we don't.
information on that. Yeah.
No, we don't. All I do know is that the Bigfoot is not living out there in the woods. Like, John and I have lived in the woods at times on our patrols, and you could go out there and you could find the evidence of everything that's naturally out there: mountain lions, bears, bobcats, and you'd be able to find where these things then, have bed down. You'd be able to find their routes getting water and hunting and all of these other things, and even their carcasses. But with the Bigfoot, you're not able to do that, and that's why I feel that it's an interdimensional being, and it's crossing, and people witness it, throughout the world, and then it crosses back over.
That's always made sense to me. That's
Yeah.
what I've always
So,
felt. Great to hear you say that.
yeah.
Yeah, I am too. Really, that really
Yeah.
does. And now let's talk about, when we're getting into the whole portals and things. Skinwalker Ranch. Skinwalker Ranch has the pictographs on the stone up there. At least one stone that we know of, at least now, they've talked about many times on the show. And it looked like and then there's the spiral. And I think, John, was that you that actually walked them up on the mesa there and was looking at that spiral? I'm trying to think back to that show now, if that was you or not. Um,
Yeah, that was me.
okay, and talking about how you had to approach it, but is that in your opinion a marking of some sort of a portal?
Me, I classified it as a religious site where ceremonies were being held. And the reason that the ceremonies were being held is the ancient people from about 900 years ago are seeing something that they're trying to keep back. They're trying to set up a wall to protect themselves. And so they're holding a ceremony up here to, in their minds, keep this evil, over on that side. And so I did call it that it was a portal location because they had that spiral symbol there. And later on, they did the photogrammetry, and they ended up seeing what looked like at the triangle. They ended up seeing a if you were to take a bunch of photographs and just throw them in the air in a whirlwind, that's what it looked like.
Yep.
And then they had another one that formed right over the spiral mesa, and I had told them that this was also a gate, and that kind of made me look good. I was just a simple deduction, Watson. Just
spot on, though. I think so. And then I mentioned that too before, is the fact that they've done so many different experiments, and these different experiments are all kind of concluding the same thing, that there is some kind of an anomaly, portal or whatever it may be, in that area right there. And it's in looking at it from different experiments that they're doing, or exercises, as I think they would call them, it's all pointing to that there is some sort of anomaly happening there. And then you've got the pictographs on the rock wall right there, on that piece of rock that was falling. And and it looked like there was a portal or something that marked out on there, and it's like the guardians of that. And what's your take on that, on the pictographs that's on that stone, for either one of you, Stan or John? Have you seen it, Stan, those pictographs there?
I have. When John and I recently went up to Skinwalker Ranch there in Vernal, Utah, and we did take a look at a number of different petroglyphs, and that particular region it's very common to see these the Fremont period markings on the petroglyphs, and you'll have the trapezoidal type figures, and you'll have the spiral designs, and also what would be more like a bullseye design, which is a little bit different, because it doesn't actually spiral in, it's concentric circles. And so yeah, we did see those kind of things. But one of the things that John and I have discussed is that modern man, we look at the fact that we got technology like this, and this back in our day, you watch Dick Tracy and you can actually talk into this. It stands alone as a phone, and so we think we are at the pinnacle of our technology and knowledge. And John and I, if you go into the history of mankind, and we feel that actually there was technologies that were far advanced than where we are today, although those kind of things really aren't acknowledged. And but I think there was much greater technologies in the past, and there may have been those influences by what you see on, television shows like Ancient Aliens and other programs that suggest this planet has been visited for a long time in the past. So, yeah.
Yeah, and in McConkey Ranch has a picture, and I've talked about that before too. There's either a pictograph or a petroglyph of the spiral, and then there's the one that shows like a cow falling upside down out of it. And a person falling out of one. And I can only say that. And again, I know, and Paul had mentioned this in the chat a few minutes ago, and I'm going to try to get to that now, Paul. Paul asked the question about if either of you, and if Linda, I know I kind of sprung that on you there for a moment. She's going to look for that comment real quick and put it up, because it is a good comment, and I think it leads right into John and your background. We kind of talked about this a little bit. She's searching for it now, but it talks about someone that is there you go. Does either John or Stan know of a historian or First Nations on First Nations that know how to read petroglyphs? And many say that there are experts, but do they? I would like a native translation I can study. John, you've got a background in this.
Yes, I do. I was a archaeological law enforcement specialist for 27 years.
Yep.
And one of only two in the Western United States doing it full time.
Mm-hmm.
That said, there are a number of books that talk about petroglyph markings, and they detail them out. Now, the way I understand these is that they are, you look at them in their entirety. They tell you where the hunting areas are. They tell you what kind of game are present. They tell you which direction to go and even how far. They tell you where the water sources are, and are you going to go up or are you going to go down to get to them? There are relief maps that actually incorporate features of the rock into the map itself that tell you what part of the country you're in. There's clan symbol. Every clan that would come through would put their clan symbol on and say, you know, hey, my clan came through here. There are other warring clans that might erase somebody else's clan symbol and say, no, this is our territory. So there's a lot of information on these things. There's depictions of beings that they were talking to or seeing. And things that I found out, you know, I think that Native Americans in the past, 1,000 years ago, knew how to utilize these gates. They knew how to traverse different dimensions. And I'm just going to use one example here. The Hopi tribe has between 250 to 350 kachinas. Wow. So you better be really rich if you ever want to start collecting them. But can afford one. But they've got all these number of kachinas, and they represent holy beings that they have been in communication with in the past. Wow. Now imagine if you had an infinite number of dimensions and control of a gate to get there, and you had thousands of years to explore these different dimensions. Wouldn't you come back with 250 to 350 separate depictions of other beings? You know, this is what you see on the petroglyphs. You see three-fingered people. You see depictions of, you know, basically monsters and even Bigfoot. And, you know, what if they had all this ability? And it would have been something that only the priests would be utilizing within that tribe. And as we go through time, with the Spanish coming into the region and everybody else, you know, kills, a lot of that information may have been lost.
Yeah. Well,
for John and I, you know, as we got into doing these presentations, going quite a ways back, early on we developed a friendship with an individual named Clifford Mahooty, which was a Zuni elder. And Clifford was a wealth of knowledge when it comes to these pictographs and petroglyphs. And I think, you know, that's the thing when it comes to you know, some people refer to rock art and things of that nature. But we don't really follow in that thinking that it's simply for artistic purpose.
Right.
Right.
It's for archiving and creating, sharing information. And
Yep.
so, especially with the paranormal related things, Clifford was a wealth of knowledge, and he's greatly missed. He was somebody that we could always reach out to when we had questions concerning some of these things. He was a medicine man and a healer, and he was just a wealth of knowledge. And so we were lucky to be able to have grown, good friends with him over the years.
Oh,
Before he
absolutely.
passed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, his legacy is living on through you guys, and thank you all
Okay.
for sharing what you know.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's that idea of being able to travel through these dimensions. I feel like often on this show, Jimm, Jeff, and I, we've talked about not only a lost technology, but lost abilities within ourselves
Yes.
that maybe humans could reach again if only we could remember how to do it. I think of reading. Reading is a skill that so many people can do, but under the right conditions, it could be lost in a generation.
Right.
Yep.
True.
We would never know that, oh, you can make squiggle lines and somebody else will read that squiggle line and hear your voice in their head. That's a form of, to me, magic. And
well, I was thinking about that. John and I recently flew back from Edinburgh, Texas, back home, and we had gone down there to do a presentation for an event down in Edinburgh. But when you think of that travel, in a sense, you are in a time machine, stepping aboard an airliner, because if you or I were to begin going outside and begin walking the distance it would take to get there, it would take, maybe a month or more just to physically walk there, if you could do that. And here we are, we can get aboard this device, an aircraft, and we can, within a short amount of time, we can go from one point to another point. And, so essentially we have various technologies that we have available that really, if people, the ancient people, were to look at that, they would look at that like magic and or something otherworldly. But me and John are the idea that the ancients had abilities to manipulate dimensions and to go in and out, and it suggests that was possible.
Do you think they still do? Do you think there's people that still do within
I think within the witchcraft phenomenon we see on the reservation, I think they do manipulate that portal, that barrier, to travel great distances and to do different things. And
so if that was going to lead me to my question, is that something that like skinwalkers are taking advantage of? And also, Stan, specifically, you had an experience with coins and poltergeist activity.
Right.
That, to me, that suggests that something with intent was manipulating these portals. What do you think that was that you attracted? And sorry for the two questions in one with the skinwalkers and the coins.
I have witnessed one of these things that people refer to as a shapeshifter or skinwalker. And most indigenous peoples will have a version of that. There's 570 something recognized tribes in the United States, and most of them will have a version of that.
Right.
But for the Navajo Nation, Navajo people, there is references to these individuals that are able to change form and into that of animals, and they gain those abilities by those animals, and so as far as the coins, yeah, there was a case I did back in 2009 where in that investigation, it was a haunting investigation primarily, and there was coins in 2 days. There were 65 coins that materialized, and these coins, at least 10 in 10 instances, I witnessed the coins materializing out of thin air and falling in the floor.
Right. So you would
And
walk into a room and they would just fall on you at one point, right?
They would fall. Sometimes they would come flying across the room. Sometimes they would hit you, and
always land on heads as well.
They would behave like a normal coin would if you took it out of your pocket and flipped it onto a hard surface. You know, they'll spiral, and then but when they would fall, they would all land heads up. So statistically, that's not gonna
That's
happen.
impossible.
One of the unique things is that still happens to this very day. The phenomenon with the coin still happens in my home.
It's still happening to you?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. So
and that's since 2009.
Yeah. So
wow.
I've collected probably hundreds of coins today. I'll put them place them in a Ziploc bag and date and time and how they fell and whatever, and I've got a pile of the Ziploc bags.
How they felt. Do you
but
feel
it's
that
not
something
amazing?
It's not a negative energy.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask. Is it negative or is it
no?
Just a communication?
It can happen. It can happen. It's happened in my bedroom as I'm getting ready for bed, and there's no negative energy attached to that or associated with that. I've spoken to medicine men, and I have a spiritual healer that I'm very close to, and for them, they advise that there's no malevolent or evil or anything of a negative intent associated with that. So I'd come to realize that for me, myself, my interpretation is that there is spirit, a human spirit that knew me sometime in the past, and that spirit is letting me know that heads up, I'm nearby. I'm around. So, and I think in at times when there may be risk, I think in that initial investigation, I think that's why I was doing that, because there was some other energies there, and I think this was trying to warn or trying to alert me to be cautious.
So I that leads me to one. I'm sorry, Jeff. I'll be quiet.
Go ahead, please. Go right ahead.
It leads me to a thought that I had. Y'all have obviously encountered a lot of things that are scary and can be scary. But like with this, the coins, you said you didn't feel fear, but some shapeshifters, that's scary stuff. But I imagine just like, in anything, it's a dual things, their polarity, whatnot. So I imagine you've encountered good things too. Have you ever these coins?
Well, I think John and I, with our training in SWAT, it taught us to rely on our gut instinct and to be able to keep ourselves safe. I mean, we had times where we had bullets flying at us, and you learn to focus and rely on your training and just stay focused on that objective. And I think, over the years, John and I assimilated that training over into the dealing with the paranormal. And we've been attacked at times, and there's ways of dealing with that and protecting yourself. And so, yeah. But we don't give in to being afraid.
Right.
We just don't do that,
I think personally, I think a lot of entities feed off of fear.
Oh, they do.
I agree.
They do.
Particularly, I think shadow beings, shadow entities. I think.
Have y'all?
Sorry, I think they are attracted to negative energy among other things. But
you see these television shows where the investigators are running around and encountering paranormal activity, and they're hollering and running around screaming, and a lot of that they're just manifesting that stuff there.
Yeah.
They're giving that energy to react and to interact, and a lot of that stuff it's trying to evoke a response out of you, and
Yeah.
maybe even these other things like Bigfoot, but we don't give into that.
One of the things that I'd like to do here is kind of a PSA, public service. We have a lot of people that ask us, what should I do to protect myself? And they immediately say, shall I start smudging? And what I would like to say, just for everybody's information, is that, don't copy. You see it on the internet. Oh, Native Americans do this. They use sage, they use sweetgrass, they use cedar. What I've been telling people is, if you want to protect yourself, go into the history of your people. Go back to the past and find out what did they do to protect themselves, and take that and use it as your own, with the understanding that when you call it a prayer, call it a whatever you want, but whatever you do, have the intent, because that's what this relies on, is the intent. Have the intent that this is going to protect to your people in the past, and find out what they did, and then take that and make it your own, and it'll have more meaning to you than just to copy Native Americans and say, well, I'm putting smoke over myself, so it should be good. But if you don't have the intent, it doesn't do anything.
If you're just going through the through the motions,
right,
it won't have the desired effect.
Right.
Yeah. Feeling is the prayer.
Right.
The intent absolutely matters, because if you're just doing it as rote exercise, it's just whether it's to invoke a good blessing or whatever. I mean, your intent is, I'd say, probably at least 50% of the formula.
At least that.
Be successful, at least,
or more.
Yeah. So go ahead, Jim.
Oh no, I just wanted to say how much I appreciate you guys talking about specifically the interdimensional and dimensional aspects of it, from going back to the whole Bigfoot aspect of it to, John, you in particular, when you were talking about how it's almost like the different dimensions. At least for me, I think that sometimes, like for instance, say at Skinwalker Ranch or some of these other hotspot locations that we've heard of in the world, it's almost like the different dimensions will occasionally bleed into each other, and like you said, they're always in motion, kind of thing. And I really that really makes a lot of sense to me. That's how kind of it would work. And I think that with a lot of this, what we would term to be magic or paranormal is it's still just science that we don't understand. But the importance is that we not try to dismiss any of this, these encounters and these experiences that we hear about, because I can imagine, like for you, Stan, when you were talking when you appeared on the Unsolved Mysteries episode, and you were talking about your personal experience with a skinwalker that you had when you were younger. I would imagine that if you're anything, now I've never seen a skinwalker. I've actually, to the best of my knowledge, never seen a UFO, but I've seen some other stuff that really I cannot explain, that has really kind of struck me to the core. And when you have that moment, it's like your whole concept of reality changes.
Right.
And it's like what your eyes are seeing, your brain tells you this isn't supposed to be possible, but yet I'm watching it, and your reality just kind of comes crumbling down at that part. What was that like for you?
For me, there was at least 3 or 4 different situations where me witnessing this thing that people call a skinwalker, in the animal form, running by my vehicle when I was young, seeing the coins materialize with my own eyes, repeatedly falling out of thin air or nothingness. Seeing this thing that people refer to as a Bigfoot with my own eyes, you know, with many of the cases we dealt with, it didn't matter whether it was a 10-year-old child or an 80-year-old person. For the most part, they were traumatized on some level, you know, by this event. And so I think it's those firsthand encounters, you know, that it's a life-changing experience.
Yeah.
And for the people that don't have those experiences, you know, you have those people that are out there desperately looking for that kind of thing.
Yep.
But they've never experienced that. They're not open to that. And a lot of times these things happen when you least expect it.
Yep.
Like with the coins, you know, I have the coins happen. You know, one morning I was at a Love's truck stop getting something for breakfast, and a coin fell in front of me, and there was a gentleman standing next to me that witnessed this, and his eyes were big, and because his brain was trying to wrap around what just happened here in front of me. And I leaned over and I picked up the coin and put it in my pocket, and but there's those kind of events that are life changing. And if you have these events, John and I, for some, you know, having been thrust into this paranormal investigation, we were put in a venue where this stuff is happening, and we're working with the people that are having these experiences. And but even like that, I mean, John and I had done a presentation up at McMinnville, Oregon one time, and the next morning I went down to the hotel, went having breakfast, and this young couple came up to me and joined me for breakfast, and they said, Stan, we watched their presentation, and they said there was one image of this where it shows and depicts a skinwalker, you know, down on all fours. And they said, we were out near Las Vegas one time, and our teenage daughter was in the back middle seat, and she screamed, and she got our attention, and there was one of these things, and they said, that's what we seen, and it was running by our vehicle. He said, we don't have any contact or experience with native tribes, but that's what we've seen. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to believe in these things, or from time to time they happen. They do, for whatever reason. And so John and I try to, so
that made me, I just want to thank you guys for saying something in the Unsolved Mysteries show. You don't like saying believers or believe, because that implies you know not knowing. You guys know, and y'all that you don't have evidence for. Y'all have
as investigators. You're there to collect evidence. You're there to document, photograph, measure all of your techniques and procedures and stuff to collect that information.
Yeah, y'all
you don't go into that with believing, you know, this is what, you know, no.
Right.
Yeah, y'all aren't saying, we're here, we believe in Bigfoot, we're going to find evidence for Bigfoot. No, you're going and conducting an investigation, and the data is leading you to, well, now you both know these things exist. And it's something that we've appreciated with the Beyond Skinwalker Ranch, the episode y'all were on, and others, where y'all and others involved are starting to say this word experiencer, because there's a difference between believing and knowing. So thank y'all for being two voices that are championing that new way of looking at this.
Sure.
Amen.
Thank you for that. I mean, that compliment. It means a lot to us, you know. We're here to try to shed light on these events, to let people know. In our experience as law enforcement officers, we took an oath. We took an oath to be honest and truthful, and to help people and protect people, and these things are real. You know, we can't always explain the phenomena, but it does happen. And if you experience them, you're not crazy and you're not alone.
Right. And y'all are helping real people. Like, again, the end of Beyond Skinwalker Ranch, when John came on and said that the investigation of that home, y'all shined, basically, I guess, shined a spotlight on that area, and the activity stopped. These are real families. These are real homes. Y'all are doing
great work.
Well, some of these things can be quite dangerous.
Absolutely.
You know, if they're not handled properly or correctly. It can be very dangerous, but
John mentioned before they can kill you.
Yeah, they can. They sure
absolutely.
can. Oh yes, very serious.
Yeah.
I
behind the scenes.
Go ahead.
A little behind the scenes on that episode. When we first talked to them, this was to get scientific data, and we were more concerned with their health and well-being, because we've seen people who have had encounters with skinwalkers that became sick and
almost died.
It darn near killed them. Yeah.
Right.
So we didn't want that to happen to anyone on the crew or anyone, our hosts or anything else. And so we were being real careful for their sakes. They, I think, would have run up to one and asked it for an autograph if they could have. And, because there's just no understanding of what these things are. To them, it's something that's exciting. And so...
And we don't go hunting. We don't go hunting skinwalkers. We don't do that, and we ain't going to do that.
It will hunt you.
Any crew out. No.
Well, y'all were very adamant about saying, we are here to collect evidence and data. We are not here to hunt. Because, again, the intent matters, right? Like, y'all were putting that out there.
Very true.
Exactly.
Yeah, and we had 3 of them show up at both of those locations. And, as soon as we realized that one was there, that's when we called it. And that's also when the wind just died completely as soon as we did. And
that was crazy.
We were getting 60 to 70 mile an hour gusts and having to hold that table down, all hands on deck, so to speak. At the second location, we determined that they were there too. And it's not something that we'll deal with it, because we've been trained to, and we know how to do that stuff and how to protect ourselves. But these guys, they don't realize what level of danger they're in.
Nope. Nor would I. And if something like that happens, John, I've got your phone number. So if something like that happens, I'm going to be calling you, because honestly, I go into this with complete ignorance. I wouldn't know. I saw somebody make a comment in here, Jan, and we're gonna open this up to some questions here in just a moment. I'll let you know, and then Jan. But yes, Jan asked a question: what if it finds you and you can't interpret what it wants? How do you communicate?
Well, I think one of the things is the location that it's happening, and so if this is happening back east in some community, I think you need to reach out to those individuals that can deal with that particular situation, because if it's happening there, then there are people that deal with that.
Regional.
So
okay,
people that are sensitive. We in all of this, I mean, we try to be forward as we can. We try not to take chances. We know how to protect ourselves, and it's not fun when you have a psychic attack, and Stan's been sitting there saying that he felt like something stuck a knife in the back of his head and was just twisting it around, and that's how we got to work with this remote healer to get that stopped. So. And we work with man too that helps us out. So we have some backup, so to speak.
Good.
But and one of the things too is we don't go looking for this stuff.
Right.
We go to places and things still happen, but we're not actively, oh, I want to go to the Queen Mary to find ghosts. We don't do that. We'd rather just leave it alone. We've had enough excitement in our life and it out on our own.
Absolutely. Okay, so we're going to take a few questions here because I like to call this at 2 hours, and believe it or not, we've been going for an hour and a half, and I know your time is precious, guys. I really appreciate it. Here's one of the questions here from Jerry. He says, are there any key locations in the area that seems to be particularly connected with the portal / supernatural phenomenon?
Well,
any key
you look at Sedona
Mm-hmm.
Sedona, Arizona, between Flagstaff and Phoenix. That is a very well-known place where just the average person can go there and experience some type of phenomenon that affects them physically, and good and bad. So yeah, I think there's places throughout we did a case in a location that's called Satan Butte on the Navajo Reservation, where there was phenomenon that mirrored what they were experiencing up at Skinwalker Ranch or Sherman Ranch. So yeah, I think throughout the world there are places. When we traveled to Scotland before and presented, there were people that approached us and explained to us there are similar areas and phenomena that they have over there. So
wow. Yeah, that's and I'm going to be heading out that way. Let's see. So Marilee asked, is there a native way of breaking a hitchhiker or skinwalker attachment?
Usually for that kind. Yeah, I was going to say, John, for that kind of stuff, you need to contact. If you're Navajo, you're going to contact a medicine man. And hitchhikers. If you're in a different area, find somebody who's maybe a sensitive, or even what Stan did in the case of haunted building. They had medicine men come in several different occasions and paid them to basically do an exorcism, and it lasted 3 or 4 months, and the phenomenon would come back. Stan went out and found a Baptist minister that was doing tent revivals, and he says, I can do an exorcism, and he went in, and that thing lasted for about 8 or 9 months, and it came nearly as strong as it was before.
Wow,
fascinating.
Here's one from Melanie, Stan and John. It appears that the hero twins are pictured at McConkie Ranch. Can you share any stories or information about them?
John can probably elaborate more on that than me.
Yeah, the hero twins in Navajo culture, you had giants, and so you have what are called the giant slayers, or the hero twins, and so even today for Navajo to have twins is considered like the top blessing you can get. To have twins. So they go way back in our cultural history. So yeah, they're depicted because I'm sure other cultures had the same this idea that to have twins was something majorly spiritual.
Wow, very interesting. Do you have another one there, Linda? I know we have a couple here from. There's one from James too. Yeah, right here. This is from James Keenan, and again, I wanted to say hi to James. Have John and Stan studied Adishkesh? Am I pronouncing that correctly? To better understand the shapeshifter phenomenon. Adishkesh.
I don't know. Never heard of it.
one of the people that I referred to as a spiritual healer is very knowledgeable in that area. I myself, I've read some things, but just more or less on the surface of that. I don't know
Yeah,
about
and
John.
we've both had to study a lot about this because when you deal with this kind of stuff, you don't want to be ignorant. And my grandfather spoke to me many things, and what they do and how they do some of their stuff. We've interviewed um, people that had done skinwalking, and sat down with them for
Bless you.
Right.
45 minutes. Or you'll have to excuse Stan; he's got a sinus infection going on,
Oh, sorry,
and
Stan.
yeah, but he's being a trooper and showing up.
I appreciate that.
So you study this literature, and you have to kind of um, man is really, especially Hollywood, is really bad about the depictions. Um, and I'll say this right up front. A lot of people point their fingers at me and Stan, and say, "How come they're showing pictures of Yebiche dancers, or they're showing pictures of Navajo dancers, and they're saying Skinwalker?"
Right.
Well, if you
It's
Google the word Skinwalker, these are and they look otherworldly. But the Yebiche is actually one of the holy people for the Navajos. And in our last presentation, I actually put up a picture of the Pope and pictures of the cardinals, and said that's like me saying that this is Satan and his demons. Well, I guess depending on what denomination you are, you might consider that too.
very, very
But
offensive, really, to the Navajo
Yeah,
people.
absolutely.
So.
Oh wow.
yeah, those images, um, and it's going to take a little bit to educate them.
Right, it will.
I know they're not going to put a retraction up saying, "Hey, we're really sorry we did this," but as we talk to the producers, and a lot of times it's the editors that get back, and they need a file picture, so they look up Skinwalker. Oh, this looks weird. They stick it in there. And so it's not us saying use these pictures. If you use Skinwalker, you would probably be scared. The depictions that I've had of them, or somebody, if you can imagine a man painting himself with white paint, like you take a sponge and just blotch it all over your body, but you're not painting your whole body, you're just blotching it on. So it almost looks like a camouflage design. And then it starts cracking. And it's in your hair. They have a loincloth on, they'll have a bag, on a strap around their shoulder. And, that's what they look like in their human form. We've seen others that paint themselves black. And show up at looking like a black sheep with the sheep's wool on it. We've had some that show up looking like a half kangaroo, half man. It just depends on the DNA of the skin that they can. And for Navajo children, they're taught at a very early age. Don't leave your fingernail clippings laying around. Don't leave your sweaty clothes, because the Skinwalker can get a hold of that and appear as a version of you.
Oof.
And that's absolutely frightening, to realize that your doppelganger could be going out and injuring, poisoning, or killing other people, and somebody thinks it's you.
Mm-hmm. I heard you say one time, and I think you said this on Beyond Skinwalker Ranch, if I remember correctly, where I heard this, but you had mentioned that if you know, like the Skinwalker, if you know their name, that's like your ace in the hole to protect you, I guess, right? Is that the right way to say that?
Yes. Yeah. During Stan and I, our investigations, we've come to know the identities of some of these people. And you put word out, that you better stop what you're doing. Other times we've determined their identities by talking to people, and they say, I know who that person was. According to Navajo tradition, if you confront them within 3 days, they'll die. And I've actually seen that happen in the past.
Wow.
There was John, you on the show, you mentioned when they become a skinwalker, there's a group that teaches them. Are these other skinwalkers, or are these a multitude of entities that are this group teaching them? And is that even something I can ask? Or
well,
but
these are human.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, these are human people. The skinwalker is not. I've seen him depicted in other TV shows as this spiritual avatar that cave, and it's directing this spirit creature to go around and terrorize. The ones that I've run into, the ones that I've known about, all the ones that have been told to me about by medicine men, are all physical people, and they can be shot. One of my grandfathers shot one and killed it, and he went to town and started bragging, and within a year he was in an insane asylum and died after that. So we think that he was given a poison because he was bragging, and you don't know who these people are. They could be your neighbors, they could be anybody in the community, one of your friends, and they keep their identities hidden. But in order to become one, you have to sacrifice somebody that you love dearly in your family. That just really matters to you, and then they're killed, and you drink their blood, you consume their flesh. It's pretty frightening. And
I think
you're
it can
all
be
in then.
I think it can be closely associated to what is known with some practices of Satanism. Around the globe, there are different organizations that practice Satanism, and there is ritual sacrifice. Excuse me, and so I think this mirrors that in a lot. This is witchcraft, and you may have what is referred to, in some circles, as a coven or a group of individuals that are. I do know that they, just like with the medicine man, they do have people that they initiate, children that they initiate, getting involved in this and learning these practices at a very young age. So, yeah.
Here's a kind of a strange question, but when somebody makes that transformation to become a skinwalker, is that a permanent thing, or is there can they go through a redemption if they, for some reason, decide not to really continue on?
I'll let John talk about that because he does know. We did do an interview with one person one time, so.
Yeah, the guy pretty much he explained that when you change shape, that everything shifts to a red spectrum, and that your vision gets blurry. And what I found out since then is that you also have a very animalistic nature. You don't think like a human anymore. You think like an animal. Now, one of the things that he said is to carry his skin in a backpack with him everywhere he went. And this is a young guy. A couple of his friends came over. Well, he had gone to a church and sat in what is commonly known as the backsliders row. And when the invitation came up, he went to the front and prayed. And he went back, and his buddies came over, and they said, "Hey, let's go out and have some fun. Let's change." So they started doing the chants and the singing to affect the change. And he says his two buddies changed and ran out the door. And he kept trying and trying and trying. And he suddenly says, "I guess that's what happens when you become a Christian. You can't do that kind of stuff anymore." And so I don't know whatever happened to him. I wish him well, because in a situation like that, you might be just killed out of hand. Because you have this, and I've spoken to others, and I've known of others, so it's really something that's frightening. You have to be very cautious. Even speaking about it, I'll be smoking myself after, and making my prayers and taking protective measures.
Is that something you would recommend for us as well? Kind of anytime we talk about this sort of thing?
Yes.
I know. Okay. Like, and earlier you said, go to what my ancestors have done. Am I, in a way, calling them for help as well? Is that?
Well,
do y'all believe that in Navajo traditions?
The rituals that they used to protect themselves. If you go into the history of whatever line of people you come from, and find out what they did, and then take that as your own, you can modify it there. You can use some form of that and make it something that's distinctly yours.
Yeah, thank you.
One thing I think that is kind of universal is that most cultures and peoples have this idea that we have guardians, whether that's a spirit or angels or these kind of things. And I think that a person can also reach out to those energies, positive energies, for protection. I know I incorporate that in the stuff that I do. So, but I think that's kind of universal.
Yeah.
Here's a question.
Go ahead.
Here's a question that I wanted to bring up, and Max said that, and I don't think this is dumb at all. This may be a dumb question, but what is the Skinwalker's purpose?
It's a great question.
Do they have? I think it's a great question. Do they have a purpose? I mean, what are they about? I mean,
well, it was told to me by a person that was very traditional years ago that this ability to change form was used as a tool of war.
Oh.
The Navajos at one time were at war with Mexicans and the Utes and these different tribes that are surrounding the Navajo lands, and but they used it as a tool of war to affect their enemies and things of that nature. It's said that, shape-shifting, you can, I don't know if this is crossing into another dimension and traveling the great distance and coming out almost instantaneously somewhere else. But it's said that these beings have that capability. And so there's a lot of different things they can use as far as their tools, but today it's primarily a source of evil. The only purpose for you to be a skinwalker is to cause harm and injury to others and or death to others,
right?
And that's really it.
See. Excuse me for my ignorance here again, and if I'm stepping into a place where I shouldn't, please let me know that. But we've heard of the story of the, I believe, if I'm saying this correctly, the Navajo putting the Skinwalker curse on the Ute tribe. Is that true? Is that something that that has happened, or is that just made up story? That
John can elaborate on that.
Yeah, in my experience, seeing the Fremont culture stuff up there firsthand and making my interpretations. What I've come to find out is that this idea of skinwalkers up there around Skinwalker Ranch have been going on for years. And so if you look at the romantic story of the Navajos putting a curse on the Utes, it sounds good. I mean, this is Hollywood stuff, right?
Right.
Some writer really came up and used their imagination. The idea is that that the Utes provided scouts for Kit Carson's in the military and sought out the Navajos, so that the Utes were considered already traditional enemies. The idea was that in 1868, when the Navajos came back, they set up a curse on the Ute land up there. Now, what actually happened, as near as I can tell, and this is a different version of history, is that upon coming back, the Navajo chiefs had sent their children to boarding schools, and a lot of them died over there. Chief Manuelito, Ganado Mucho, all these chiefs or head persons. And there was a faction of Navajos that wanted to war with the United States, even though the treaty was signed. And so now you have a political faction that wants something different. They don't want peace, they want war. And so over a period of 9 years after, they sought out and captured what they said were witches or skinwalkers and executed them. And so on the face of it, you'd think, oh, they're killing, these skinwalkers. But I think, and what history actually shows us, that this was a different political faction that was advocating war. And the chiefs knew that we would be destroyed, to step back and hold the treaty. And the evidence up in Utah kind of encourages that thought that the Fremont people were seeing the same phenomenons up there and were afraid of it, and were trying to take measures to keep it at bay or stop it.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Thank you for explaining that. That's something that really, bothers me. Sometimes we know the narrative that's given on a TV show or a movie or something like that is not quite right. And I hate to try to, continue that or say that myself when I don't really know the facts behind it. And I that's why I wanted to ask that question. And again, I wasn't
I appreciate that.
Stepping into an area that I wasn't, Yeah, exactly. And you had mentioned earlier about the picture of the skinwalker, and you go out and grab this picture. I may have been guilty of that myself. And I don't ever want to do that. I respect the nations within our nation. I respect them, and I don't ever want to do something that's considered disrespectful. Absolutely never want to do that. So I take that. I would take that really hard against myself. John asking the question here, and then after this one, we're gonna wrap this up, and I'm gonna have Jim and also Seth, if you have another wrap-up question you'd like to ask before we go. But John asked, can a skinwalker be summoned? I don't know why anybody would want to, but is that possible?
It does happen. Yeah. There are people that reach out to individuals that practice this ability and to cause harm to and or death to somebody else. It does happen. But you must realize that in practicing this, there's always that element, really what's referred to as karma. You might go out and you may gain from harming another individual, but it's also going to come back on you later on tenfold. So that's the offset with those that practice these kind of things, and those people that summon people that practice this stuff. So
Wow. I can
there's
imagine.
a price to be paid.
Oh,
There's a
I would
price to be
imagine.
paid for it. Yeah,
And there should be if you're doing something like that. That's oh my
right.
gosh.
So don't send one after your ex, John.
Right.
John
Oh, no.
Edwards.
John Evers, yeah, John Evers, not John Dover. So, Jim, Seth, any last minute questions you'd like to ask before we wrap this up?
Seth, I'll let you go first.
Yeah, I kind of said this in the pre-show. I just wanted to again express my thanks to y'all as someone interested in this, and also someone who's had experiences that made me into somebody who was a total skeptic on all things paranormal. Turned me into a knower of certain things, and I understand a lot more about skinwalkers and the history behind the legends. I've been watching the show Skinwalker Ranch for a couple seasons now, and it wasn't until you two gentlemen came along that I truly had to digest the implications of all of this and really take it seriously. And I appreciate you guys, because while we are not going to give in to fear, we are going to be respectful, right? Because these things are real, and I understand the tradition of not talking about these things. So an extra thanks to y'all being brave and talking about it, because I think we're entering a time of more people awakening to these things, and we're going to be looking to the First Nations peoples. Y'all have that connection to that knowledge that a lot of us have lost, and just thank you from my heart to y'all for sharing that and being here. And that's all I wanted to say.
I appreciate those comments.
Yeah, and I'll just add what Seth just said. Just a very sincere, heartfelt thank you to both of you for not just speaking with us tonight, but better educating us on the traditions as they actually are. If there's anything, I mean, I guess one final question I would ask is, if we want to really truly be better informed about the traditions, to make sure that we're not perpetuating some of the inaccuracies that are out there, such as the picture that's always circulating about the skinwalker. If you could maybe tell us about where would be a great resource for us to turn to make sure that we're not adding to some of the inaccuracies that are out there, and what can we do as podcasters and just as fellow human beings to help keep those traditions that you folks have, to maybe put them out to a broader audience. And because I like Seth, I feel that our history as it's taught to us is not it's not complete, and we get just there's an awful lot pertaining to archaeology and just history in general that I think that we're not being told the full story, as it were, and
or the correct story.
Or the correct story, exactly. And we hear all these stories of artifacts that are found that are out of place, that don't belong, and where they're discovered. We hear these legends of giants, and it's just I think our world, and as you said just a moment ago, Seth, I don't think there's any coincidence that all of these things are starting to happen right now regarding UAPs and how it's all starting to be accepted more into the mainstream. I think that a lot of the truth that's been hidden about so many things is maybe starting to come forward, and it's just such an exciting time to be here. But truly, thank you to both of you. And where would you recommend that we go to learn more of the correct traditions, the way that you have them with the Navajo, that can set us more on the proper path of learning the way that we should?
Well, I think there is so much information out there that really there's not one central source for that kind of information. You just more or less have to choose that topic. And today we have tools such as Google. You can get online with various sources of books. And I think you just kind of have to educate yourself, in what's there. So.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you again, truly, gentlemen. This has been just absolutely wonderful and so insightful. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and your experience with us. Really, really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Glad to be a part of this. It was a good.
And way to go
podcast.
for working with Metallica. That which was scarier, working on Skinwalker cases or working security for Metallica? I mean,
you know, it was an enjoyable experience. I was a big fan of theirs to begin with, but yeah,
right on.
That's great. John, were you going to say something? You look like you might want to add to that.
Stan plays that music. He plays rock and roll,
Guilty.
60s and 70s pop, on mine. But Stan will get down there and thrash with the best of them.
I graduated in 1984, so I was right in that era of the heavy metal stuff, and yeah, that's what I grew up with.
One of the earlier podcasts you were on, I saw a guitar hanging on the wall. Do you? That you? So you play, obviously.
Yeah, that's Stan's.
John has a whole guitar collection, and so do I. And that's one of our. That's one of the things we love and enjoy.
And I got to play Stairway to Heaven when it first came out in high school. Before it was banned from every music store in the United States. We had crowds of people around us, me and two other guys playing it all at the same time. So yeah, what a time.
That's great.
Well, that's awesome. I'm a professional musician and music producer, so I can definitely relate. And I love that great rock stuff, Led Zeppelin, AC/DC, Sabbath. I mean, I'm also a big synthesizer guy, though, so I like a lot of the synthesizer stuff, too.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, the song that I played at the beginning of the show tonight was written and produced by Mr. Jimm Kjelgaard there, and it is awesome. Wow. Yeah, he's done a great job with that, so I appreciate that very much. I'm a guitarist myself, so is Seth, so you got a bunch of musicians all on the screen here tonight.
That's nice. Yeah, that's great.
Yep, absolutely. Well, this has been an absolutely wonderful evening, and I cannot thank you enough. As Jim and Seth have already said, John and Stan, thank you so very, very much for coming on. I hope that we can do this again at some point. I know that myself and Christina, we're going to be heading out. We're going out west, and we're making our way eventually down to Vernal, Utah, to go to Phenomicon. That's coming up here. You guys, either of you going to be around Phenomicon at all, or that area during the time?
No, we're not cast members. We're just occasional bit players. But we have a friend named Michelle Miner who will be at Phenomicon, and she is our newest member of the Paranormal Rangers.
All right.
So she will be appearing with us in some later stuff, and she is Navajo and Pawnee.
Oh wow! Okay.
Yeah. And I think she's doing some work with Blind Frog Ranch.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just wrote her name down because I'm going to be out there, and so is Jim, and I definitely would like to meet her. I'd love to meet you guys at some point.
Sure.
Yeah, we're gonna wrap this up. If you would hang around just for a moment after we close here. But folks, thank you so very much for joining us here tonight. We did another 2-hour show. I didn't really. Sometimes I say that I don't really mean it to go that long for my guests to sit here and put up with us for that long and answering questions. But I tell you what, this has been absolutely wonderful to have you guys on tonight, and I appreciate everyone that has come out and joined us. Seth and Jim, thank you so very much. You guys had so much great content as always. Folks, that's it for tonight. We will not have, I mentioned this earlier, as I am traveling on my way down to Phenomicon, I will be going live at different points out at Devil's Tower, the Badlands, different places to give you a little bit of a glimpse to the travels. So just make sure you are subscribed. Click on that notification bell so you'll know when I go live, and you can join us in our travels as we go along. So, but no official show for next week. And then, of course, we'll be going live out at Phenomicon when we're there as well. So thank you very much for everyone who's been here, and we'll catch you next time right here on the JFree906 podcast. Good night, everyone.
See ya.
Bye.